Well, the comments said they loved the red lighting from the Falcons videos, so here we go. What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the surprising reveal of the number 27 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Las Vegas Raiders. Certainly a team that I am much lower on than consensus. Gonna get some pushback on this one. So I'm definitely excited to break this thing down and explain why this team comes in at number 27 for me. But before we do that, please do hit that like button down below. Really does help support the channel, support this series. You guys have been showing up big with that. Also, if you're new, if you enjoy the deep dive, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any uploads as we count down to number 1 throughout this summer. But the Raiders have had a very busy offseason, making some serious changes to both the staff and the roster here. And a busy offseason for what I firmly believe is, by a comfortable margin, the single worst front office in the NFL. It feels like even when they make a good move, it's compounded by 2 or 3 bad ones. And that's been a theme throughout the last few off seasons, and really was no different this offseason as well, as we look at the key departures and additions. So it's not just players. We have a defensive coordinator change with Paul Guenther out, getting fired at the end of last season, and Gus Bradley in. We'll detail that in depth as we move forward. But a lot of player turnover as well. Nelson Agholor, who really stepped up as a key deep threat for this team. And then the most questionable kind of combination of moves this offseason was just completely deleting the offensive line, getting very little in return, trading away Rodney Hudson and Trent Brown, 2 of the top offensive linemen at their positions, getting a pair of mid-round picks in return, and releasing Gabe Jackson. So from center to right tackle, you go from what was one of the best groups to just adding tons of question marks and getting very little in return. So really was not a fan of that. And then just releasing Maurice Hurst. Like, why? He was the only decent pass rusher on the inside of this defensive line next to David Irving, who they also cut. Man, Raiders fans, maybe you can try to explain that one to me, but I'd love to see you try. Then LaMarcus Joyner is out here after they misutilized him as a slot corner for the last couple of years, so that could be a potential upgrade. But you lose all these pieces, they are naturally going to do something with that. And here are the key additions. Gus Bradley coming in as the defensive coordinator. Going to implement that Seattle 3 defense. And the thing with the Seattle 3 defense, which has been almost proven by Gus Bradley, is he's tried to replicate it throughout the league for multiple different teams, is it's such a simple system that is elevated by its players. It is not a scheme that elevates its players. They keep things simple and hope that they have star talent that can execute their roles. You want a good pass rush, you want a good group of corners, you want a top free safety up there, you want a good cover linebacker to run that cover 3 system. And Raiders fans last year were screaming to get Paul Guenther fired, and I was like, that's not really the problem. Sure, you could do better, but it turns out when you have a terrible front office that gives you the least talented defense in the NFL, it doesn't really matter who your damn defensive coordinator is. And they're going to Gus Bradley, who he's shown throughout the league when he has talented defenses, he's been a good defensive coordinator. When the talent drops off, he's not a good defensive coordinator. So, man, I just can't really get excited about that hire here. But they did make some decent moves as far as the additions. It's not all bad. The Kenyon Drake signing, though, not being one of them. Now one of the highest paid backup running backs in the NFL. So if you're going to delete your offensive line to clear cap space, you're really going to spend that on a backup running back? Okay, John Gruden and Mike Mayock. They do bring in John Brown to basically fill the void of Nelson Agholor as that deep threat. He's a good player, but does have health issues. Nick Martin to replace Rodney Hudson. That's far from a push. And then the overdrafting of Alex Leatherwood in the first round. But I do like the addition of Yannick Ngakoue, definitely the best pass rusher they've had in the building since trading away Khalil Mack for a running back. And then Casey Hayward comes in. Really nice, cheap free agent ad. I thought he was one of the top kind of bargain bucket corners who's really still a good player. Had a down year last year, but familiar with this system, familiar with Gus Bradley. And one of the best things they did this offseason, in my opinion, was bringing in Casey Hayward to boost the floor of this cornerback room. And then Trayvon Merrick, an excellent pick in the second round who should start at safety. So a busy offseason, as we mentioned. We are now going to go through the roster, rank each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league, and that's going to start with the quarterback room. So Derek Carr is a very good NFL quarterback. To me, he is in this middle bucket of quality starters who honestly aren't going to be the reason you lose a lot of games, but also aren't going to be the reason you win a ton of games. He's not going to make or break your season, if you will. You know, his ability to play at a top level is very contingent on good pass protection, receivers getting open, and good play calling. Just his skill set alone, he's not a guy that extends a ton of plays, manipulates pockets, and makes up for bad pass blocking or bad play call, and can really elevate the players around him and become that elite quarterback. So barring some insane, unforeseen emergence of Derek Carr as this elite playmaker, having that it factor that no fan of any quarterback wants to hear, but that's really what it kind of comes down to for Derek Carr. Barring that breakout, he really isn't going to make or break this team's season, like we've talked about with, say, the Eagles, or spoiler alert, we will eventually talk about with the Broncos, where their teams look pretty good, but that quarterback is such a polarizing variable. With the Raiders, I rank them 15th, and I expect them to come in like right smack dab there. I think it's everything else here that we're about to break down that is really going to change how good this team's season can be. Derek Carr, to me, is a very safe variable in this equation as about the 15th best quarterback in the NFL. So then you have Marcus Mariota as the backup, and this is definitely worth talking about. I mean, he came in, I think it was week 14 against the Chargers. Carr pulled up with like a groin injury or something, and Mariota was awesome, man. And I was not a big Mariota fan in Tennessee as his career went on. My big criticism of him was he was so timid. He didn't always look for that deep ball, and even beyond that, he didn't use his legs the way he could. He's this amazing athlete, but plays so stiff and timid. That is not the quarterback that we saw in week 14 or whatever week it was against the Chargers. He was playing balls to the wall, launching the ball down the field, using his feet consistently, and we've seen this now across the league. None more noticeable of Ryan Tannehill replacing Marcus Mariota, where a change of scenery kind of gets you to realize maybe what your flaws are, take a step back, improve those things, and then come back with a chip on your shoulder and look like a completely new person. And in Marcus Mariota's case, in a very small sample size, that seemed to be the case for the former number 2 overall pick. And he is a highly intriguing backup, one of the best backups in the NFL. And this is where it's going to get controversial. I'm not going to predict this to happen, but I think it's a lot more likely than people are going to be willing to admit. If we're sitting here week 12, week 13, and this team is playing like my projection here, where they're not very good, I think John Gruden's the kind of coach that will pull Derek Carr to see what Marcus Mariota has left. And man, from what we saw in that Chargers game, there's potentially reason to get excited about that player. So it's something to keep an eye on potentially happening this season. Again, I don't know if I'm predicting that. Derek Carr, as I said, is a very good NFL quarterback, but sometimes it's just time for a change, and that could be a possible outcome this season. And then Nathan Peterman, not going to spend a lot of time there, but I do think he's underrated in some ways. Like, people think he's the worst player in the NFL. There was a lot to like from him coming out of Pittsburgh. He got a bad rap because he was kind of forced into action and outmatched on that Bills team early on, but looked outstanding in the preseason 2 years ago. And he's a guy that I think can prove a lot of people wrong in a different kind of way and carve out a career as a nice backup in the NFL. So I'm kind of rooting for the guy just because everyone just dunks on him. He's like the poster boy for bad NFL quarterbacking, and I don't think that's necessarily fair. So, ranking 15th in the NFL for quarterback, really kind of smack dab in the middle. And there's going to be some Raiders fans that are crazy Derek Carr truthers, but I think that's pretty unanimous there for the quarterback. And then the running back room, great running back room, even though they've paid a lot to have that with a first-round pick in Josh Jacobs and the free agency signing of Kenyon Drake, but it is a good running back room nonetheless. I'm a big Josh Jacobs fan, just all-around excellent game. You've got the contact balance, the shiftiness, the vision. Would like to see him get upfield and be a little more explosive in the receiving game, improve that route running a little bit, maybe if you want to nitpick his game, but I definitely think Josh Jacobs is one of the 7 or 8 best running backs in the NFL. I don't often see him on those lists. So I'm a big fan of Josh Jacobs' game. He's going to contribute to this 6th overall ranking with the running back room. And then having a depth piece in Kenyon Drake, who, replicating the Alabama backfield, is going to be a really nice complementary piece to Josh Jacobs. If nothing else, relieve him for 25, 30, up to 40% of those snaps. Keep both these guys fresh and healthy, because Jacobs has had a rough time staying healthy. So if you want to justify the signing a little bit, that would be a good reason why. You're recreating Kenyon Drake's role at Alabama. Who was he behind then? Was that Derrick Henry he was with? I think it was, where Drake was kind of the third down back, and Josh Jacobs obviously out of Alabama as well, why I'm referencing that. But Kenyon Drake kind of the third down back could be sort of the setup there, even though I think Josh Jacobs still has some unproven upside as a receiver as well. But, it's a good 1-2 punch. Drake maybe a little more straight line speed, receiving ability, and Josh Jacobs more of that 3-down, bruising type. So it's a good combination. I have really nothing bad to say about that duo. You got Jalen Richard, who now steps in as a third running back, kind of the ideal RB3, a scat back type, good third down back. Theo Riddick, probably not going to make the team. And then Trey Regras, a oversized, undrafted free agent who, I don't know, maybe gets practice squatted or something. So no questions really about this running back room. They're going to contribute at a high level, and I'm a big Josh Jacobs fan. So let's move on to this receiving room that's very fascinating. So it's going to start with Henry Ruggs being listed for me as the wide receiver 1, because I think that's the way they are looking at it. Even though you can make a pretty strong case that both John Brown and Hunter Renfrow are technically better receivers right now. But Henry Ruggs going to try to be the focal point of the perimeter passing game for the Raiders here. They spent that, the 11th pick on him last year, and man, was he rather disappointing as a rookie. And a lot of people thought that was an overdraft, that they should have gone with a Judy, a Lamb, who are just more traditional number ones. But as the Raiders like to do, they lean towards that speed, and turns out they have speed in Nelson Aguilar, and they didn't really need to use Henry Ruggs in that role. Very much a player that showed splashes, but also had a lot of disappointing moments as well. Just the route running, the separation, not always there. You were going to always get those highlights with the speed Henry Ruggs has. Ruggs, he's not quite like Jalen Waddle was this year, where he's really able to change gears and make guys miss and put that towards route running as well. Much more of a John Brown or, Deshaun Jackson, where he is more of that traditional deep threat, and you're pairing him with a quarterback here in Derek Carr, who, as we mentioned, very much plays in structure, and not a lot of times that deep threat is going to be the primary read. When he is, you can get the ball to Henry Ruggs, but it just wasn't a great pairing, not to mention Carr just doesn't play with that aggressive downfield mentality. He loves to kind of operate in the short to intermediate game. So that alone, I said at the time when they drafted Henry Ruggs, wasn't exactly a match made in heaven, in my opinion. So can they get that rolling more? Carr did have that chemistry with Nelson Aguilar last year. You're really hoping that you can see a spark there. But right now, Henry Ruggs is not living up to his draft pedigree and has a long way to go. But the highlights and the splash moments were there, and I do like Henry Ruggs. It's just a lot of question marks there with your quote-unquote number 1 wide receiver. John Brown, in theory, should be a good mentor for him and a player that can play the Nelson Aguilar role if Henry Ruggs doesn't step up. It was a good signing. He was really cheap. He's had a hard time staying healthy, really, 3 of the last 5 years. He's been on and off the field, and at this stage in his career, that's probably something you can expect. But regardless, a good signing, a piece that they definitely needed, because if you look at this receiving core without Nelson Aguilar last year, it was not particularly good. You do have Hunter Renfrow as the slot receiver here. Feel very good about that. I mean, Renfrow has been the same guy for the last 4 or 5 years, going back to his college career. third and Renfro. Like, he is the dude on third down. He just knows how to move the sticks. So I'm a big Hunter Renfro fan for what he is, but he's, not some game-breaking player. He's not going to change the numbers in the passing game. He's not someone that you're terrified as a defense, but he's a really good slot receiver and just has a knack for finding the sticks. So you do like Hunter Renfro there, and his skill set is perfect for Derek Carr in this offense. He's probably the best receiver here. Bryan Edwards as the wide receiver 4 is definitely someone you should have on your radar. Now, with John Brown coming in, he is going to have a limited path to playing time. But as I mentioned, if John Brown can't stay healthy, you're going to really lean on Bryan Edwards to step up. And he showed a lot of promise last year. A big-bodied outside receiver, can go up and get it, has some speed to separate, definitely needs development to show as a route runner and as a true number 1. But I do like Bryan Edwards, and if he gets the opportunities, I think he would step up to the occasion. And then behind that, you got really solid depth. You got Willie Snead, who as a wide receiver 5 at this point is totally fine. Zay Jones, Keelan Doss, both guys have made some plays for this team over the last couple years, and I would expect one of those two guys to stick here. Marcel Aitman, kind of in the mix there with those guys. Trey Quinn, kind of that big slot type, and a couple other guys competing for probably practice squad opportunities. But overall, this is one of the worst groups of wide receivers in the NFL, but their overall ranking for receiving is going to come in 27th, which shows you the ability that Darren Waller has to boost that ranking. Waller is one of those X factors, a guy that changes the numbers and creates mismatch problems in the receiving game, which is going to help. And you are super excited for Darren Waller. And this is probably the best thing that John Gruden and this front office has done in this regime, is identifying the talent and getting the most out of him, because he is just special. He will line up everywhere. He has improved as a blocker to be a true tight end. You just can't cover the guy, and the biggest step he took up last year was becoming a reliable contested catch option for Derek Carr. Carr hasn't really had that guy since he had Michael Crabtree way back in like 2015, and he got that guy back in Darren Waller. So you love to see him utilize that 6'6" frame to become that contested catch monster, because with the ball in his hands, he's fast and powerful. He can separate. John Gruden schemes him up super well. So Darren Waller, easily a top 3 tight end and a repeat season of what he had last year. You've got to mention him with Kittle and Kelsey for the elites of the elites. Just got to see it one more year probably before we're comfortable with that. And then the tight end depth, Foster Moreau, one of my dudes. I was like legitimately pissed that they signed Jason Witten last year. I was like, why? Foster Moreau is such a better football player. So you are going to get a increase in the tight end production because Jason Witten was so utterly useless last year, and Foster Moreau is like an actually good tight end that they were just playing Jason Witten because, I don't know, John Gruden wanted to have dinner with him the next night. Like, I don't know what the point of that was, because Foster Moreau is good, and when they call upon him, he's a stud. So hopefully he can get real. In some packages, like, he'll be the starting tight end because Darren Waller is a receiver in a lot of packages. So he's exciting. I love Foster Moreau. I wish he was in a situation where, he would start, in my opinion, for 10 or 12 other teams. So he's a stud. Then you have Derek Carrier, quality veteran. And then keep an eye out for Matt Bushman. I think he can make it here. Missed the 2020 season and the opportunity to play with Zach Wilson at BYU in his breakout season, but was definitely I would say a draftable prospect from the year before and a decent athlete, so could have been a bargain pickup there with Matt Bushman. And then the running back group, I still like Josh Jacobs in the receiving game. I just think he could elevate and become like an Alvin Kamara level receiving back because I just think the skill set is there. But some of that is just instincts, and Kamara just has that extra it factor. But he's still a very good receiving back. And then Kenyon Drake is just a nice complement to it. Maybe a little more straight line speed and route running ability. And you've got a good contribution from the running backs in the receiving game. Rashard and Riddick are good as well. So it's enough to elevate the receiving grade a little bit. But as I mentioned, 27th in the NFL for the receiving grade. You love Darren Waller there. You pray Henry Ruggs can step up. But I really just, if I'm being honest, don't think that this is all that good of a receiving core. Not good enough to elevate Derek Carr into this outstanding season, in my opinion. And then the offensive line is a concern for me as well. We mentioned from center to right tackle, completely overhauled for no really good reason, in my opinion. You do have that breakout season from Colton Miller last year. He got the bag. You feel comfortable with him at left tackle, especially from a pass protection standpoint. But he's the most solid rock on this unit. And then Richie Incognito at left guard. If he can stay healthy at 37, 38 years old, that's great. He can still play when he's on the field. Honestly, I think it's a little hard to expect that you can get a full season from him. So he gets the 83 grade for when he's on the field, but I don't know if you can count on that. And then the drafting of Alex Leatherwood at right tackle. My God, this was such a bad pick. This team just loves to take guys that played in the college football playoffs that were actually second or third round prospects in the first round. I mean, my God, it's so consistent at this point, and it was so predictable. Alex Leatherwood can be a very good player here. He could have a career path like Colton Miller had, where he struggles early on and then develops into a good player. But you know who could be like really good now and even better than Alex Leatherwood in 4 years? Like Tevin freaking Jenkins or Christian Darrisaw or Sam Cosmi or all these better tackle prospects. I watched Alex Leatherwood get beat at Alabama consistently because his footwork stinks. I watched him at the Senior Bowl with like low-end 5th, 6th, 7th round prospects running circles around him. He's not a very good tackle prospect. I would have loved him at guard, absolutely, and I think there's a decent chance that eventually we see him slide into guard, and he could be, honestly, an elite guard. I mean, his run blocking is great, but to protect Derek Carr, who's not this elite echelon mobile quarterback, I don't like it. I don't like it at all, especially when you were counting on that from Trent Brown last year. So that was just such a miserable move, not a waste of a draft pick, but a really poor draft pick, given the players that were available. I mean, my goodness, I just can't excuse that for this team. They bring in Nick Martin. He's fine. He's maybe even underrated, but he's not Rodney Hudson. He's a good pass protector and has struggled as a run blocker, so you could do worse, maybe, than Nick Martin at center. But then Denzel Good at right guard. That's your answer to cutting Gabe Jackson? I mean, he's not a good. His last name's Good, but he's not a good football player. So you went from one of the best center to right tackle combos in the league last year to now arguably the freaking worst. And you're just expecting the offensive line to stay a top 10, top 15 unit for your quarterback that needs a great offensive line in front of him to play at a high level? Where's the cognitive connection on that one? Because it doesn't add up to me. This is such a concern for me. You do have Sam Young, who is like insurance for Alex Leatherwood if he is unplayable, but you know they're going to roll out Alex Leatherwood at right tackle all year because they spent a first-round pick on him to do it. Brandon Parker was a third-round pick. We haven't seen a ton from him, but this team has been good at developing talent. So they clearly don't believe much in him after drafting Leatherwood, but in theory, a third-round pick in year 3 or 4 should be able to take that step up. John Simpson, I think he has some upside at guard. He was hit or miss last year, but was a decent pick. And if you're going to miss games from Incognito, I think you could expect Simpson to step in, but that's far from anything you feel good about. Patrick Omama, don't want that happening. They got Andre James, the backup at center. They draft Jimmy Morrissey, was a draftable center prospect, good 7th round pick, but not expecting anything from him. They are going to rank 22nd. I do have some trust in this coaching staff that has done a good job developing these guys. As I said, I'm giving them some benefit of the doubt because on paper this is a bottom 5 offensive line in my opinion, but I trust them to evaluate Nick Martin, that he's in shape, Denzel Good and Leatherwood to play a little bit above my expectations, but I know those aren't like truly awesome football players, so their ceiling is capped. I just can't get excited about this offensive line at all. I think it's really going to hold this offense back and be a big reason why now they're going to rank 18th in the league for offense, which is lower than most people are going to rank them. They were a really good offense last year, but I am expecting regression in that department because of this offensive line. And they rank 6th for the offensive coaching. This is not about John Gruden's ability to coach. I've been very consistent in saying that I think John Gruden is one of the best offensive coordinators, one of the better just head coaches in the NFL. His problem is his influence into the front office. And it's hard to say what's Mayock and what's Gruden, but clearly some of it is Gruden. And he's a great coach, but he puts himself at such a competitive disadvantage by how brutal he is as a team builder. Just as far as getting good players and maximizing value and all that stuff, it is so difficult and frustrating to see for me because this team could be so much better, but they put themselves they start from behind because they're so bad at building this roster. As far as the scheme for the offense, it's a good, balanced, kind of pro-style offense. I think Gruden does a really good job of collecting things that work from around the league and mixing up the run game. They have a really well-diversified kind of concepts with the way they run the ball, and they will use play action, and they attack the middle of the field really well. He builds this offense around Carr's dominance in the short to intermediate game really well. So I like the structure of this offense. It's going to be a good offense because it's going to be so well designed, and Gruden does know how to use these different pieces, but those pieces could just be so much better than they are. And yes, the offensive line is a big reason you can expect some regression in this offense, but let's be honest, the biggest reason I'm lower on this Raiders team and I'm comfortable ranking them 27th in the league is this defense, because this is a pathetic defense. If it wasn't for the train wreck Houston Texans, this would be the worst defense in the NFL. They rank 31st in the league. So let's go through it, man. Starting with the run defense, which I always start with the interior defensive line here. Like, what's worse than pathetic? Because I already just used that word. That's the interior defensive line here. It's to the point where I'll be very surprised if they don't add like a Geno Atkins or K'Wan Short, because it's so hard to look at this interior defensive line group, both from a run defense perspective here and pass rush. So you do have Jonathan Hankins, who's still a very good run defending defensive tackle. He's the best run defender they have on the interior by far. And that's not so much the question. It's everything else that you're going to be rotating around here. They signed Quentin Jefferson, who can contribute as a pass rusher, but as a run defender, he's never been that guy. He's undersized. He doesn't play with the play strength or the discipline to be that player. You're probably not actually going to see him a lot on early downs here, but who are you going to see? Undersized Darius Philon? No. Undrafted rookie Darius Stills, who's also undersized? No. Undrafted street free agents like Matt Dickerson or Niles Scott? Nope, not counting on that. Kendall Vickers, who played like 4 games last year and was below average. Okay. Solomon Thomas, who's never been a good run defender and has been a first-round bust. I mean, maybe. What are they doing here? Why did you release Maurice Hurst? Like, this actually wasn't the worst run defense with Maurice Hurst. They got to add someone, and I'm sure they will. And honestly, if they added a Geno Atkins or K'Wan Short, looking at my rating spreadsheet, that would probably be enough to at least kick them up to 26th ahead of our next team that we're going to reveal. So do keep that in mind for if and when they sign someone here, because I look at this group, it's like, that can't be what you're doing. But as we sit here today, teams are just going to gash them up the middle. And then your edge guys, so Clelin Ferrell, actually a really good edge run defender. For as much of an overdraft he was, based on that draft class and the pass rushers that have been in that class, we'll talk about his pass rushing ability later. It's not great, but as a run defender, he's one of the better run defending edge players. So you don't necessarily want to run at him, but on the other side, they'll rotate in Carl Nassib early, I'm sure. I'm listing Yannick Ngakoue as the starter on the edge there, although he's going to be probably more of a pass rush specialist, with Carl Nassib being the only other edge guy here I truly trust in run defense. Max Crosby can shoot some gaps and make some plays, so if you're playing Crosby and Nassib on earlier downs, you could probably do worse as your second edge run defender. So that maybe is the best run defense contribution in this group. And then at linebacker, these guys just don't defend the run. I mean, Nicholas Moreau is undersized. Corey Littleton is like a converted safety that's always been a bad run defender. So those are your outside guys. And then you have Divine Diablo and Tanner Muse are your other linebackers, also converted safeties, who I don't see playing on base early downs. Nick Kwiatkowski's fine. He's a better coverage player than a run defender, but it's fine. He's kind of a average, not elevating the run defense, not a detractor either. But I'm worried about this team's ability to stop the run. They're going to rank 27th in the NFL. If they add a K'Wan Short or something like that, maybe it goes up to 26, 25, but it's just really, really poor run defense. And then you get to the pass rush, where it's also just not very good. I think this is one of the biggest disconnects from where I stand on this pass rush and where Raiders fans feel about this pass rush, because you see the names there, right? You got Clelin Ferrell, you got Yannick Ngakoue, you got Max Crosby, even Jonathan Hankins. Like, people know he's a good football player, but a lot of people see the name and assume he's good at both run defense and pass rush, which is not the case. So I do like the signing of Yannick Ngakoue. I think without him, this would have been the worst pass rush in the NFL, and he's enough to take them to 28th. I don't want to go as far as saying he's overrated, but what I will say is 3 teams, including Mike Zimmer and the Baltimore Ravens, who know what they're looking at that edge position, have gotten an extended look at Yannick Ngakoue and said, we're good. We'll get a 3rd-round pick for him. We'll let him hit free agency. We could take or leave Yannick Ngakoue, basically. And the Raiders become the beneficiary of that decision, and he upgrades their pass rush. He's a good quality number 2 rusher. You don't want him to be your number 1, which is the case here. He's going to get you 50 pressures. He's going to upgrade this group, but he plays with no power, and he wins with a lot of technique and explosiveness off the edge. I like the signing, but it's not like that's going to make this top 20 pass rush. You're leaning on Clelin Ferrell and Max Crosby as kind of the opposite end edge group there. We might see Clelin Ferrell step inside as an interior rusher, kind of that 3 technique, which he's done a decent amount of, which you would probably expect with how bad the interior group is here right now. And then you put Max Crosby out there as kind of that situational 3rd down rusher. I actually thought Crosby took some nice steps up last year just on film. Like, I thought he played with a little more consistency with his power and started to show ability to set up some counter moves a little bit better. So, I've been hard on Max Crosby, definitely. Because of his 2019 season, he had like a historic rate of converting sacks. Like, his sack numbers just were not consistent with the amount of pressures he's had. But last year, he was a 40 pressure player. I think he can be that number 2, but I don't feel great about that. I'd rather Yannick be my number 2, and then you can go get some elite alpha edge guy. They just have a bunch of decent edge guys with Ferrell, who actually had a nice year last year as well, but again, a low-end number 2 as a pass rusher. So that's your 3 edge guys. That's what's helping you rank 28th, because you got Quentin Jefferson, who's a pass rushing specialist 3rd down guy, but he's not some high-efficiency 3rd down rusher. He's fine. He's their best interior rusher. Jonathan Hankins is a run defending specialist. So that's just disgusting. I mean, you're going to get so much help from the guards because you can just leave these guys one-on-one and feel pretty good about it. As far as the depth and who can rotate in here, you can't expect anything from Solomon Thomas at this point. Is he even going to make the team? I don't know. He's regressed since being a first-round bust. It's been hard to watch his career. Kendall Vickers, Darius Philon, and Stills there. You're not expecting anything there. And then definitely not expecting from Dickerson or Scott. So like I said, it is puke-worthy, this interior defensive line. I will be stunned if they don't sign someone. Now again, if they went and signed a Short or a Geno Atkins, all of a sudden you can take the interior group a little bit more seriously, and that's going to help the edge guys, and you might boost this up to 24, 23, but it's just not the case. You've got decent edge groups, but the interior is so bad right now, I can't even look at it anymore. So 28th for the pass rush. I also should mention Carl Nassib and Malcolm Kuntz. Nassib been a much better run defender than a pass rusher. With Ferrell and Crosby there, I'm not expecting Nassib to rush the passer too much. And then they did bring in Malcolm Kuntz. He's not Khalil Mack out of Buffalo Raiders. I don't know why they necessarily spent a 3rd-round pick on him. Was a little bit rich for my blood, but still a pretty good prospect. Really high motor, explosive guy. Some upside there. Honestly, probably has a higher upside than Clelin Ferrell. So does he reach it? Time will tell. But not a terrible pick, even if a little bit of a reach. Someone to keep an eye on. Probably not going to play a ton in 2021, though. So again, 28th for the pass rush. It's just another unit here making this defense an eyesore as a whole. The linebacker is probably the best group here, even though they played miserable last year. They ranked 19th at linebacker. It's hard not to expect a better year from Corey Littleton. I mean, he was really hard to watch last year. They paid him a ton of money in free agency, and he was straight up like one of the worst linebackers in the NFL. You'd be crazy not to expect some regression back to the mean, for him to make some more plays in coverage. You know you're not getting anything from him in run defense, but he is a guy that can get some good depth in his drops, fits the Seattle 3 system really well, can get to the sideline and cover out routes and corner routes. So I expect him to have a better season, though it's a projection based on how he played in his first year outside of Los Angeles. You got Nick Kwiatkowski in the middle, very good quality starter. I got no qualms with him as your second linebacker, even though you maybe wish Corey Littleton was a little better. And then right now I've got Nicholas Moreau as the LB3. We mentioned you got Divine Diablo and Tanner Muse, who are both converted college safeties. I'm a big Divine Diablo fan. Now, linebacker has become, with the modern game, with these RPOs and the increase in play action, has become possibly the hardest position on the field to play as a rookie. And Divine Diablo making that conversion from safety to the way they're listing him as a true linebacker, I actually, in my pre-draft analysis, was advising against that for Divine Diablo. I wanted to see him be more of a safety kind of play, like the Jeremy Chin role in Carolina, where he was actually a safety that would play some linebacker as opposed to just a linebacker. But just my thoughts on that. I don't know if we see a lot of Divine Diablo in 2021. I do love the pick. He's one of my guys in this draft. And then Tanner Muse, them drafting Diablo kind of tells me that they got a good look at Muse as a converted free safety from Clemson to linebacker, because at least Diablo was a converted strong safety and played around the line of scrimmage. Muse was like a 230-pound free safety at Clemson and didn't even get on the field. So this kind of tells me that they are maybe a little bit more out on Tanner Muse. But going back to Nicholas Moreau, had a decent year last year. He's an undersized guy and just, has never really become a quality starter, but he's the guy I project to be their LB3 in base packages. And, if you had injuries to Littleton or Kwiatkowski, I think early on that's who we'd see. Diablo, maybe more of a developmental piece, though I do believe in Divine Diablo, and I like that pick. So 19th for the linebackers, which you never want the linebackers to be your best group necessarily, especially when your pass rush ranks 28th and your secondary here is also going to rank 28th. Gosh, where do we start? I don't like this secondary. I don't believe in this secondary. I like the signing of Casey Hayward. Let's start on a positive note. They pick up Casey Hayward basically for free. I can't believe that he was such a bargain. He had a down year last year, but was still a good starter for the Chargers. And the year before that, and the 4 or 5 years before that, he was a legit top 10 corner. Unbelievably good combination of zone instincts and ball skills. This guy just processes the quarterback at such a high level. He's familiar with this system. He's not a great press player. He actually plays at his best in kind of off coverage cover 4, but the Seattle 3 defenses around the league have evolved a little more to playing a little more off coverage. And I think with Casey Hayward, you're going to see that. You're going to see a lot of cover 3 and some cover 4. And I can't imagine that he isn't their best corner this year, barring Trayvon Mullen here as cornerback 2, taking a massive step up. Mullen's been fine as a second-round pick in that really bad 2019 top of that draft class. But he hasn't been great. He's been a little grabby. He's not a great athlete. My comp for him coming out was Xavier Rhodes, who's been up and down in his career. And I think Trayvon Mullen can be that quality number 2 that Xavier Rhodes is right now. We just need to see the consistency. I need to see him get less grabby and play with better zone instincts. But he's fine as your cornerback 2. He's still not ideal. You hope he can get there. And then the slot corner, I originally actually had Amik Robertson listed as the slot corner. It's going to be a complete open competition between him, who we saw limited snaps last year from Amik Robertson, but was a fun player coming out as a 4th-round pick last year, and Nevin Lawson, who's kind of the experienced slot corner there. So I think it's going to be a complete open competition between those 2 players. Technically, Nevin Lawson is the higher graded player right now just because we've seen more. but definitely a higher upside there from Amik Robertson. So a potential room for excitement and growth with that slot corner position. Damon Arnett, your first-round pick last year, to me, is a backup this year. Just was such a bad pick. This was like one of the worst draft picks, period, of the last 5 years. I cannot believe they spent a first-round pick on Damon Arnett. He's slow. He doesn't have good zone instincts. He wasn't like all that great at Ohio State, was a fifth-year senior who never really had a breakout year. Why did they draft him in the first round? This is who Damon Arnett is. Cornerback 4. He's good depth. He has limited physical upside. And I think they know that because they signed Casey Hayward to start here. So I don't even expect like some breakout year from Damon Arnett. I'm sorry, Raiders fans. I try to project positive outlooks for players. Like, I think Trayvon Mullen can get there. I think Amik Robinson can be a good slot. I don't see it with Damon Arnett. I never did. I hope he proves me wrong, but I think this is his ceiling. Like a 68 overall cornerback 4. You got Rasul Douglas, who's probably a better player than Damon Arnett, but you know they're going to play Damon Arnett because they spent that first-round pick on him. I like the Nate Hobbs pick. Really good zone instincts, super quick feet, played really well in that cover 2 system under Lovie Smith. So I wouldn't be surprised if he competes for that slot corner role as well. He's a little bit of that undersized guy. But honestly, with Casey Hayward as a mentor, do keep an eye on Nate Hobbs because similar kind of physical profile and skill set as far as that ability to read the quarterback's eyes and be a good zone corner as kind of that safety on the outside of the defense in some of these systems, although that's not traditionally what the Seattle 3 defense looks like. But I did like that pick. You have Isaiah Johnson, who's just this lengthy athlete, a 4th-round pick in 2019. I think they'll keep him around just to kind of see how he can develop. And you're looking at probably either Lawson or Douglas as the odd man out in front of you there. And then not really worth talking about the rest of these guys because we just talked about 8 guys. You can't keep everyone. So they have depth. They have maybe some guys that you've spent high draft capital on that can develop, but I just don't see a ton of upside here. Like, I don't see anybody on this unit that I feel could emerge as a number 1 corner, and Casey Hayward, even at that, is maybe a question mark as far as is he a number 1 with him having a down year at 32 years old now. So, man, cornerback group is just pitiful. And then the safety group at least has upside. The Trayvon Merrick pick, if you just flipped that with the Alex Leatherwood pick, the draft looks a lot better because Merrick was kind of a first to a second round prospect, Leatherwood more of a second to a third round prospect in my opinion. But Merrick is probably going to be that free safety, that Earl Thomas role here, which he has the range to do it. Now, he was a great scheme fit for kind of a hybrid cover 4 defense, and honestly, when you look at some of these guys' skill set, like Casey Hayward, Trayvon Merrick, in a cover 4 setup, those guys are mucho bueno. I like it. But in cover 3, still good, but not the perfect application of those guys' skill sets. Because Merrick is he's got really good hips. He can convert into man coverage really well. I think he has really good range too, though. And he played a split safety defense at TCU, so there's going to be an adjustment period if he's going to be that true free safety, that Earl Thomas cover 3 middle of the field guy. But he's a super smart player, and you could actually even see an even better version of him using the range and the speed and the instincts. So I'm very excited about Trayvon Merrick. This was, this and Casey Hayward were probably the 2 best moves that this team made this offseason, in my opinion. If you didn't make those 2 moves, my God, this secondary would be just awful. And then you got Jonathan Abram, who I don't think is the second best safety on this team, but given how much this team has invested in him, I do think starts as the strong safety in this Seattle 3 defense in that Cam Chancellor role. But of all of the fireable offenses that this Raiders front office has had in the last 3 or 4 years, I think drafting Jonathan Abram with the first round pick that you got for trading away Amari Cooper in the first round might be the biggest of the fireable offenses. Can't cover a nosebleed. Was maybe a late second, early third round prospect as a box safety, a good tackler, kind of leader of the defense type. But no reason this guy should have gone in the first round. No range. He's constantly out of position because he's so aggressive. I mean, he is straight up a liability on the field. This team lost games last year because of Jonathan Abram and his just consistent ability to be out of position in coverage. A difficult player to watch, probably the most overrated player in the entire NFL, and unfortunately for the Raiders, they're probably going to play him again this year because they spent that first-round pick on him. To say he's been a first-round bust is an understatement, and Raiders fans still back him up. It's pretty wild. They bring in Carl Joseph, who was a first-round bust for them at strong safety, but he makes the Jonathan Abram pick look like drafting Aaron Rodgers at 24. I mean, my God, they're bringing him back. He should start at strong safety. He's not particularly good, but he's better than Jonathan Abram. So hopefully the Raiders can, wake up and realize that. I honestly think Jonathan Abram, if it were me, I'd maybe even cut him because he is not going to shut up if he's on the bench, and I think he's a liability for this defense. So that's my opinion on it. Raiders fans are going to hate that I just said that, but honestly, it's where I stand. I would cut Jonathan Abram, start Carl Joseph, and start developing Tyree Gillespie. But again, that's just me, and then I would actually play Divine Diablo as a safety here. But it is what it is. It's a really bad group of safeties, but Tyree Gillespie, another really good fourth-round pick here. He was my fourth safety in this class. He can do everything, and he's another guy I loved as a quarters coverage defender where he has the agility to flip into man coverage. He's got the range to play up top. He's a physical tackler, some inconsistencies, can take some bad angles. But I actually think Tyree Gillespie is better than Jonathan Abram, but Gus Bradley isn't going to realize that. Then you got Davin Leavitt, Crawford, Teamer, whatever. So they rank 28th in the secondary. They're saved by Casey Hayward and Trayvon Mullen. Should get solid slot corner play there, I think. And then I do expect nice things from Trayvon Merrick. But yeah, man, it's a rough group of defensive backs, and it's not like they're getting helped out by the pass rush here. So the defense as a whole, ranking 31st in the league. The defensive coaching coming in tied for 30th. I don't have high expectations for Gus Bradley to just, overhaul this defense and get all this stuff working. On top of that, the home field for the Raiders shouldn't be great relative to the rest of the league. I know a lot of people, myself, that are excited to go see that new stadium and cheer on the road team. So something to keep an eye on there. I don't know if they're going to have that true electric rocking home field, especially after they just moved away from Oakland. So that is going to hurt the defense as well. And we've talked a lot about the Seattle 3 defense. Most people are familiar, a lot of cover 3, and it really just comes down to that. Typically, the Seattle 3 defenses like to press and get up in people's face with their cornerbacks and lean on the pass rush, kind of getting in like 3 or 4 seconds is kind of the standard of what they ask their corners to cover for as they press. But it's changed a lot, and I think Gus Bradley, coming from the Chargers, has learned a lot of kind of cover 4 influences and has changed up the system a little bit. So it's a Seattle 3 kind of core that has evolved a little bit that I'm sure, it's not going to look exactly like the Legion of Boom, but that is the core influence there. And then the special teams is fine here, kicking game, fine. I think that Gruden really does a good job of getting the team culture as a whole to buy in, knock on wood if you're with me. He gets good special teamers here. He gets guys that are going to compete and take that as an advantage to maybe go get playing time. He's kind of got that old school, the best players are going to play type of mentality in the culture. So that helps the special teams, but it's not a great special teams unit. And then the culture, it's the best culture we've ranked so far because, like I said, John Gruden's a good coach. We just described that knock on wood if you're with me culture. They do a good job of player development. They do have a good scheme on offense. They've got good leadership. It's just, it's everything else, man, that kind of drags this down. Like, I think they kind of deep down know that they're not getting the talent that they need to win here. So it's a good culture. It's just not an elite culture. I think that's fair. And then the strengths and weaknesses here. Honestly, the only 2 true strengths I saw on this team was the offensive coaching. I think Gruden is legit as a play caller and as a coach, and the running back room. But beyond that, what is this team's true identity? Because I couldn't tell you. Their weaknesses are really not the positions you want to have weaknesses at either. Pass rush, secondary, and your perimeter receivers. possibly the three most important positions in the NFL outside of that quarterback room. So really concerning kind of strengths and weaknesses. This team is not well built for the NFL game in 2021 that's all about passing, offensive line, pass rush, and secondary and quarterback play. They're good at quarterback and then either average or below average at everything else, if not bad at everything else. So that, I think, paints a pretty clear picture of why I'm not big on this Raiders team. They won 8 games last year. I don't see it as sustainable based on the roster talent here. You know, to be completely honest, if you ripped John Gruden's coaching ability off this team and put in, say, Mike McCarthy, this is potentially the worst team in the NFL. And then as we look at their schedule here and my over-under win prediction for this team, so I have them going 4-13 this year, which is a worst-case scenario. I think they still have a ceiling of 9 wins, and I'm giving them losses for a lot of winnable games in here. But I will say their start to their schedule is pretty rough, and this is a team that I think could get off the rails pretty quickly. When you don't have that talent base to lean on, if you start to lose your culture and you start to lose a bunch of games, that's part of my pessimistic outlook for this team is the start to their schedule. Because, again, they just don't have that talent core to lean on to get back on track if they are reeling. So they start with Baltimore and at Pittsburgh and then Miami. I've got them starting 0-3 and then at the LA Chargers. I actually have them winning that game just because I don't think they start 0-4, but they certainly could. And then they have 3 winnable games here, really 4 winnable games with their next month of the schedule here, with Chicago, at Denver, Philadelphia, and at the New York Giants. So right now I'm projecting them only to beat the Philadelphia Eagles at home amidst that group, but that's where this season is going to be decided, is that second month of the year there, coming off that tough start to their schedule. But if they do start 2-6 like I'm projecting here, and then they have to go to they host Kansas City for their next game and end up 2-7, do we start to see those whispers about Marcus Mariota? And is it time for a change just to see if anything changes? Now, this could all play out very differently. Chicago, Denver, the Giants, I think Miami, Pittsburgh, those games are all winnable. It's just hard to say how it's all going to play out. I don't see them being favored in those games. But you do have Cincinnati at Dallas, Washington. Again, it's not the most difficult schedule in the world. I just don't think they'll be favored in a lot of these games. I have them beating Washington there. And then you do have a rough stretch there at Kansas City, at Cleveland, Denver at home, at Indianapolis. Those are 3 really tough road games if you're talking about trying to put this season into a playoff push. It almost feels impossible at this point to me. And then the Chargers at home to wrap up the season. Ended up giving them loss there because I had them beating the Chargers early on. So 4-13 is my projection for the Raiders. Raiders fans are going to hate this, and this is one of those deep dives that could bite me in the ass. This is an aggressive take by me to put them towards the bottom of the league. This would leave them picking in the top 5 of the draft and in the quarterback conversation for next year's draft. But again, that ceiling is 9 wins. I do like Gruden as a coach. I think there's certain aspects, just like with all these teams, that could go correct. But I just don't have that optimistic of an outlook for this team. I think they've been playing with fire with the quality of this roster and still winning a lot of games for a while, and I just don't see that repeating. I don't see the top-end talent and high-end coaching on the defensive side of the ball that can elevate that and make it happen. So that's my outlook for the Raiders. There's going to be some disagreement there, but I'm sure there's going to be some people that are buying what I'm selling here as well. So definitely let me know in the comments down below. What do you think? Have I sold you? Are the Raiders going to stink next year? Or am I dead wrong about this entire team? Let me have it. I'm ready. But do hit that like button whether you agree or disagree. If you enjoy the video, if you enjoy the series, let me know by hitting that like button. Make sure you subscribe as well. And we'll see you guys for the next deep dive here in a few days. We're trying to go with that every 3-day schedule here. I'm going out of town next week, so probably only going to get one deep dive next week until I come home next weekend. Heading down to Chicago to visit some family there. So appreciate your patience as the rate slows down here on the deep dives of the next 7 days or so. But we will see you guys for the next one in about 3 or 4 days, and we'll see you there. Peace.